advice service. I'll tell you a bit more about the funding advice service later on. But so thanks for joining us this morning or this afternoon now. This session is designed to provide a general introduction to fundraising and is part of a series of fundraising webinars hosted by CAN. There's details on the other 3 sessions on the website at the moment, but basically they're building a case for support, making the most of the grant search engine iDocs, which BCP Council and Dorset Council pay for the Dorset areas, and also looking at, we're going to be looking at CAN's fundraising toolkit as part of the session as well next time. So in terms of an introduction to fundraising, the first point to always look at is your group or organisation funding ready? And so we'll be reviewing that. We'll be looking at potential sources of income, how to make a successful approach, and as I mentioned, funding advice available for CAN members and the CAN fundraising toolkit. So the first starting point in being funding ready is funders like to see that there are certain governance arrangements in place, and it's important to have those confirmed before you start with your fundraising. And these practices and policies help funders to see that you're a well-managed organisation, and it gives them a good understanding of how you operate. So firstly, whether your group is constituted. I mean, some of this information is not going to be relevant for some of you, but some new organisations, this will be helpful, hopefully. So if your group isn't yet constituted, it's important to consider what is the right type of structure for you to adopt, and which suits your organisation and the activities you want to run. And that will help you to make the most of your fundraising efforts. Because some funders will only fund certain types of organisations, such as a charity or a CIO. And some will also fund constituted groups, community interest companies, community benefit societies and other models. But if you're not yet constituted, then CAN can help you with this. Steve Place is the expert in that field, and he has a lot of introductory information that he can share with you and guide you through as well. So it's also important to look at your committee and board structure. The majority of funders will want to see that you have at least 2 unrelated people or directors on your committee. And often funders will ask you to supply details about the skills and experience of the people on your committee and board as part of your application. And it's important that you use your committee and board, you have the right kind of skill set on there to support your organisation and the work that you're doing. And that's a good indication to funders as well when you can convey that to them. So obviously a good starting point as well is to have a bank account in place, which is an appropriate one for your organisation. Most funders want a minimum of 2 signatories on that, and that's just as a safeguard measurement for your management practices. And it's pretty standard with most funders. So annual accounts, it's very important to keep these up to date for your organisation. If you're a registered charity and you need to submit these to the Charity Commission, then please do make sure you do that in a timely manner each year, because when your accounts are submitted late, you get a big red line through that on your Charity Commission record, and most funders will look at that. So it's not necessarily a red flag for the organisation, and these things do happen, particularly when they're reliant on volunteers, but it's a good indication of strong financial management that you keep on top of that, and the right policies and documents are in place. So alongside that is having policies and procedures in place. Funders will often ask you for things like your safeguarding policy. Equality, diversity and inclusion policy is pretty key now as well. And data protection, health and safety are the kind of basic standard ones. But more and more funders are asking about environmental and sustainability policies now as well. So again, this is something that can support you with if you need assistance there. So moving on to what type of funding you need. The main types of funding are core costs, which will support your ongoing running costs, which can include your salaries, utilities, and rent. Historically, this has been the hardest type of funding to locate, and a lot of funders have specifically said they won't fund core costs, and they've focused more on sort of project work. But there is a shift happening there, and particularly since COVID, a lot of funders have been part of an initiative run by IVAR, which flexible funding, and a lot of funders through that recognise that in line with COVID that organisations actually need their core costs funded to enable them to do the work they need to do, rather than going off chasing different pots of funding and kind of being creative with their fundraising, presenting key pieces of work as projects, that kind of thing. But so there is a shift happening, but it's still, there aren't so many funders that will identify that they will fund core costs still, but it is happening. But the other key funding is project work. So this can be over a specific defined period, things like pilot projects if you want to test new pieces of work. This does tend to still be the easiest source of funding to locate, because it's a kind of identifiable pocket of work effectively that you can measure and then you can report back to funders on. And but it's important that you don't go chasing pots of money and kind of reinventing the work you do as projects to be able to just secure funds. So capital costs include things like building, equipment and vehicles. And so it's important to do your research to ascertain funder preferences as part of your fundraising. So some funders will only fund core costs or project costs, and some will only fund capital costs, whereas others will do a mix of them. So, but there are ways around the different restrictions, and a lot of organisations will include a piece of project work with an element of core costs costed into that. So, yeah, you know, there's ways of being flexible within the restrictions that funders put out there. So different sources of funding. To help ensure the future sustainability of your charitable group or organisation, it's important that you're trying to gain income from a variety of sources of funding rather than just relying on one key source. But having said that, grant funding does tend to remain the primary source of funding for charitable organisations, but it can be competitive. It's getting more and more competitive, and it is a changing landscape. So grant funding can come from a variety of sources, including central and local government. Government funding is the second largest income stream for the voluntary sector behind public donations. And in 2020, 15.4 billion was distributed in government grants, but this has steadily declined in recent years and is continuing to decline. And the days of organisations getting core funding from their local authority are sadly long gone now. But and also larger organisations tend to receive proportionally more from government than smaller ones. And with the majority of this going to social sector organisations, often in the form of contracts as well as grants. And they tend to be more nationally based bodies rather than local charities as well. So charitable or corporate trusts, there are over 8,000 charitable grant-making trusts in the UK, and they give out 4.9 billion annually to charitable organisations. So the top 50 corporate foundations reached 230 million in 2019, and this tends to steadily increase year on year. A lot of these funders have large endowment funds that keep on growing through investments, and they will give out a proportion of grants each year, but they keep their core pot in place. So it's you know, a fund that continues to grow. And there are small local funders as well, organisations like the Rotary, Masonic, charitable organisations, and there is a range of small local charitable foundations as well in Dorset. Dorset Community Foundation has a very good directory of that on their website. So there's a link to that from our fundraising toolkit I'll mention later. But they tend to be quite small family charities and giving out small grants, but they can, they can be a useful source for small local organisations. The National Lottery remains the key funder, particularly for new and smaller charitable organisations. And since 1994, 46 billion has been raised through the lottery, and 670,000 projects have been funded through it. So, and that's a wide range of projects in a wide range of local communities. So the lottery distributes their funding through, their main one is the National Lottery Community Fund. Then alongside that, there is Sport England, National Lottery Heritage Fund, Arts Council, and the British Film Institute. So a very important fund for small new organisations is the Awards for All programme run by the National Lottery Community Fund. Support's available for a wide range of projects which benefit local communities through that scheme. And they're just about to increase their grant offer to 20,000, whereas it has been 10,000 up till now. And it's one that you can apply to repeatedly. They do obviously like, as all funders, for you to kind of demonstrate that you can be sustainable in the long term. But you can go back multiple times to Awards for All, and the grant increase to 20,000 is going to be, a very positive step actually. And it's a very, very simple application form. They're basically, the key thing with the lottery is for you to be able to demonstrate that the community needs your work and has demonstrated that it wants to see your work taking place. So it all comes back to community with the Awards for All programme. But it's a very straightforward, flexible application to apply for. You get a decision within a short space of time, and your funding is released to you immediately. So it's a very good funder to go to. So other sources of funding, things like community fundraising, which can include things like events, collections, raffles, and individual. Oh, sorry, I've skipped past one. Individual. Okay. Do that one first. Individual donations. You can include things like regular giving, where people give regularly through their salary or just through a donation through their personal bank account. And almost half of voluntary sector income comes from the public. This is the largest source of funding for charitable organisations now. And in 2020, 62% of people gave to charities, which was a total of 11.3 billion. And so, and in 2021, individual giving exceeded government giving for the first time in 20 years. So it tends to be a growing source. I think recent years, there's been a bit of a drop with the cost of living crisis and COVID, but it does still tend to be a steady source of funding. And you can develop good long-standing relationships with individual people. So research shows that people over age of 65 are more likely to engage in charitable activities and giving. But there is a growing number of young people that support charities as well, with many of them giving online and through text donations and through social media appeals, that kind of thing. And generally across the board, research has shown that fewer donors are using cash and more using contactless or digital methods of donating to organisations as well, either through a website or through directly through their debit card. So individual donations can come in a variety of forms, from one-off donations, regular giving, major donations, leaving a gift in a will or legacy, and also through online shopping. There's a lot of these good cashback schemes now. We've got links to those on our fundraising toolkit as well, where you can set your organisation up. And when people do their just standard shopping through different organisations, they can opt to get a cashback donation to your organisation through that scheme. And they do tend to work very well now. Yeah, as I mentioned already, events, collections, raffles. If you're organising those kind of events, please do check the statutory guidance on them. Again, that's on our fundraising toolkit, and there's lots of links in there because there's different legislation around events, collections and raffles and lotteries as well. that you need to adhere to. So, and some of them you need to get a license from your local council, or you have to register your lottery or raffle collection. So just check out all the guidance for your local area with that, just to make sure that you're operating effectively within the rules. Crowdfunding can be an excellent way to fundraise and to galvanise support of your individual donations. It can be a really focused way of promoting your work, building supporter engagement, and to raise significant funds in a focused amount of time. Crowdfunding appeals tend to work best when you've got a specific appeal for a specific piece of work or project, something like a building or an initiative that you want to run, and that you have a focused time frame for them. And but they do tend to be quite resource intensive, because you need to put in a lot of effort to keep promoting your appeal, getting it in the local press, the local radio, that kind of thing, to get your support on board. And then through social media as well, to keep sharing news of all your different supporters, and to kind of build up that momentum with it. Crowdfunding, you can do things like offer some kind of gift or some kind of benefit to your supporters in return for their donation. And that's a good way to get them involved in your organisation as well. But obviously there's different appropriate ways of doing that for different types of organisations. So contracts can be an important source of income for charitable organisations. It can be a complicated process, and many commissioning organisations, such as the local authorities and NHS, are geared towards more commercial arrangements than working with the charitable sector. However, there's major progress being made on this, and CAN is actually at the forefront of that, working with NHS, and there's an emerging VCS assembly, which is working to achieve a real shift in Dorset. So that's a very positive piece of work going forward at the moment. Trading, there's scope for different charitable organisations to gain income from trading through selling goods and services. There's certain rules and regulations around this, and Steve Place again is the expert on this and can provide specialist advice, and there is also information on our website. Corporate support can be a very useful way of gaining support for your organisation. It can come in a range of ways, from cash donations or donated goods and equipment, to sponsorship, pro bono support, and volunteering opportunities for staff. A growing number of companies are creating corporate social responsibility policies and recognising that supporting a charitable organisation can bring positive recognition for their company for their customers and their local communities. And it's a potential way to build loyalty with their customers, as well as engaging their staff and providing community benefits. And companies also get tax relief on their charitable support, so it can be a useful gain for them too. The amount of funding secured from corporate supporters generally is relatively much lower than from charitable trusts, government or individuals, but it can be a useful contributor to support your work. It's important to carry out research into the potential companies that you want to work with before you make your approach, to understand whether they have a history of giving, if their brand and values match those of your organisation, and how your work could help the business to communicate those values to their customers and support their marketing and charitable objectives too. So corporate support really needs to be a partnership where the company is gaining from their support of you, as well as their support to you. So gift aid is a very important thing to remember, because it enables your organisation to reclaim 25p in every pound that's donated. So that can significantly add up. So make sure your organisation is registered for gift aid. And again, there's links to that on our website. So how to make a successful approach. I've highlighted here the Fundraising Regulator Code of Fundraising Practice, which is a very helpful source of information and guiding principles really on how to conduct your fundraising efforts. And I think these days people are more and more clued up on charities, and there have been some bad press, unfortunately, about some negative fundraising activities. So it's important that your organisation reviews that and operates within those principles. So building your case for support is really the key. Securing funding can be a very competitive process, and it's important that you can clearly communicate why your cause deserves support. Funders like to see that you understand the needs of your beneficiaries and your local community, and data can be a very useful way to communicate this. Funders will often prioritise work that takes place in disadvantaged areas, so it's important that you understand the needs of your local area and your beneficiaries. So your case for support can be strengthened if you can use data and statistics to be able to demonstrate the needs of your local community and how your work is meeting that. So it's very useful if you can build an evidence base, and you can do this by reviewing data that's available publicly online through organisations like the national government, local authorities, NHS, police, and other charitable organisations, campaign groups, and research organisations. So there's a whole wealth of data available online. And in our fundraising toolkit, we have a whole section about data and evidence, and signposting you to things like the indices of multiple deprivation, which is where they classify the different deprivation statistics of each area, looking at things like income, health, crime, poverty statistics, that kind of thing. And you can search on your postcode area and your wider local area, and you can look at what the statistical priorities are for the people in your community. And if your work is focused on things like a particular health need, NHS produces a lot of data that's available nationally on different health priorities and different health needs. So it's really helpful if you can pull that together into a basic evidence base, which can just be a couple of sheets of information with key statistics that you can pull out to support your campaigns and your funding bids. So in terms of making a successful approach, research is key as well. You have different funders have different priorities and criteria. So it's important that you're researching that and making sure that your work is a good fit with the funders that you're hoping to approach. And again, individual donors and corporate supporters may have different priorities. So it's important that you approach your different audiences with different angles. And leading on to that is engaging the people you work with. So it's important to tailor your approach rather than just producing blanket information that's then sent to different audiences. When you're putting together grant applications, don't assume that the funder knows your work, and be explicit about what you want to do and how your work will help benefit your local community and your other beneficiaries. A lot of funders receive many applications, and they haven't got the time to go off and do further research into organisations. So whilst your local audience might know exactly what you do and other supporters, it's really important that you convey that succinctly so that the funders have all that information to hand that they need to make a decision. So it's important to explain why your work is needed now rather than in a year's time. You know, a lot of funders are receiving many applications for similar types of work, and fundraising is very competitive. So it's particularly if you're applying to national bodies, you'll be facing a national level of competition. So it's important that you can communicate why your work is needed and why it's needed now. So for the long term, it's very beneficial to build a relationship with your funders and your supporters, and going back to them to communicate regularly what you're doing, sharing your stories and your successes, because often funders will like to build up long-term relationships with an organisation, and they will, you know, they'll be happy to repeat funding to you. So, and many funders you can go back to on an annual basis. So, but it's very important that you continue building that relationship beyond your grant application. So you go back to them with your annual reports, your end of grant reporting, that kind of thing, so that you're not just requesting them for money and then they don't ever hear from you again. So the most productive relationships you can develop are ones where they become familiar with your organisation and your contacts, and you're sharing a lot of helpful information with them about what you've done with their funding and how it's made a difference. So moving on to CAN funding advice, we have an online fundraising toolkit. It's not actually visible at the moment, unfortunately, but it will be online very, very soon again. It's just that we're in the process of transferring our website to a new provider. So it was on there previously, but it's just in a different section at the moment while our member zone is built. So the toolkit is only available in the member section. So you're going to need to be able to log in to access that. But membership is free, so please do join CAN. It's free and you get lots of benefits by becoming a member, and you can access a whole lot of extra information through the member zone once it's up and running again. So as I mentioned, we have a whole series of training webinars, not just fundraising focused, but generally about supporting organisations and developing your governance, all different aspects. We have Meet the Funders sessions where we have different funders who can talk to you about their programmes, their priorities for the kind of projects they want to support, and you have a direct opportunity to ask them questions and share information about your organisation. So that's a rolling programme of Meet the Funder events. There was one yesterday with Dorset Community Foundation, and we have Talbot Village Trust is coming up. They're going to be hosting one soon, which is a very key local funder for Dorset. And Lloyd's Foundation is going to be doing one in the next few months as well. So we're very fortunate we get some very good funders come on board with that. And it's a good opportunity for you to hear firsthand about their work and what they're supporting. So one-to-one support for CAN members across BCP and Dorset. As I mentioned, I'm a funding advisor and I work 2.5 days with CAN. I can work with organisations who are members to look at existing funding streams, identifying different sources of grant funding, developing fundraising strategies, writing strong applications, and reviewing grant applications and bids as well. People will often send through a draft application to me and just say, can you have a look over this for me, and just give me any additional pointers. So I'm
Louise, I think we've lost your audio.
Oh, really? Oh, has it still gone?
Oh. No, you're back. You're back.
Oh, back. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I hope I wasn't sending everybody to sleep then anyway. Yeah, so basically, if I'm very happy to provide that kind of support to members. So please do get in touch if I can help with that. So this is a screenshot of the fundraising toolkit, how it's available in the members section. It contains information on grants, donations, community fundraising, events, data, evidence and data, monitoring and evaluation, lots and lots of detail. And there's lots of links on there to best practice, legislation guidance, and things to basically support your fundraising work. So please, once it's back online again, which should be in the next couple of weeks, and please do, if you're not a member yet, then it's a good opportunity to join now, and then you'll have your login details by the time it's online. But otherwise, if you're a member, you'll be able to log in through the new member zone. Okay, so thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody had. If you don't have any questions, that's fine as well. If you just want to get back to your lunch. But my email was on the slides that Bethan's going to send around as well. But and please do feel free to get in touch with me directly if you have any specific questions about your organisation and your work. Hi, Lorraine.
Hello, it's not actually a question. It's just to say you mentioned the I can't think what they're called. When you buy things, you get some funding.